He said, "You belong to me now," and her old life vanished forever. After Penelope saved Dominic Rossi from a billion-dollar trap, she thought she could return to her tiny cubicle and feed her cat. But Dominic knew the truth. The moment she exposed the Moretti family ends plan, she became a target. Her apartment was already being watched. Her boss had betrayed her, and the only place safe enough for her was inside the Mafia King-S fortress. Let us pause on this opening frame together, you and I. The camera lingers on Dominic Rossi, his pen hovering over a $4.2 billion deal meant to wash generations of blood from his family legacy. The room feels impossibly heavy. Suddenly, the oak doors burst open. A terrified accountant stumbles inside, gripping a red folder, her voice breaking as she begs him to stop. You might expect the wolf to roar. Instead, Dominic goes completely, chillingly still. It is a silence that paralyzes even the hardened killers standing beside him. It leaves us with a simple truth to remember. True power never actually needs to raise its voice. The most dangerous weapon a predator possesses is the cold, calculated art of absolute unpredictability. Before any blood spills, we need to shift our focus to this Penelope Hayes. In the cold, ruthless world of high-stakes finance, her survival strategy was blending into the background. The senior partners looked right through her, locking her out of their inner circles and burying her as a desk under mountains of data just to break her spirit. But arrogance always comes with a massive blind spot. By shoving her into the shadows, those men unknowingly gave her a quiet gift. Because no one ever paid attention to Penelope, they never noticed how sharply she tracked their every mistake. It is a strange reality we often overlook in our own lives. The people we ignore and push into the darkest corners are usually the clearest view of the monsters hiding in the room. Penelope did not just look at spreadsheets. She felt the heartbeat of the lies inside them. She tracked dirty money through empty shell companies with absolute precision. Picture the scene. A miserable Tuesday night, Hef's TDC slapping against the glass of her cubicle. The office floor is swallowed by darkness, lit only by the pale glow of her screen. She is running one last check on the Aegis Capital buyout. On paper, Aegis is a financial giant, but underneath the numbers, they are a violent crime syndicate. Her innocent desire to do her job perfectly is about to drag her into a nightmare. It leaves us with a tough lesson to swallow. Sometimes, simply doing the right thing with too much heart is exactly what paints a massive target on your own back. Stick with me on this one, because the tragic irony is hard to ignore. Aegis Capital was just a perfectly tailored suit, hiding the bruised knuckles of the Rossi family. But Dominic took over his father's violent empire at 30, spending 5 exhausting years trying and climb to clean his family name. This global shipping deal was his desperate attempt at redemption. His chance to become a ghost the federal agents could never catch. Meanwhile, miles away in the rain, an exhausted Penelope rubs her tired eyes and opens a hidden folder. Without even knowing it, this quiet accountant has just unlocked the tiger's cage. It is a reminder that echoes through all our lives. The most massive, life-changing collisions always seem to happen on the quietest, most completely ordinary nights. Our minds naturally crave order, and Penelope had a brain tuned for absolute perfection. The camera pushes in closely as she notices something wrong. It starts as a tiny math error inside a schedule for cargo ships docked in Italy. Any other weary analyst would have blamed the late hour, packed up, and gone to sleep. But Penelope feels the wrongness in her bones. Whispering to herself in the empty room, she digs into the shipping logs, realizing these massive boats are not carrying textiles. She breaks past the security walls, sinking into the hidden numbers. Over 3 tense hours, sheer chair terror physically changes how she sits in her chair as she uncovers a horrifying secret. It serves as a stark warning to us all. The smallest, weakest thread can always unravel the most brilliant lie. The entire tragedy plays out right there on a glowing monitor. Meridian Logistics is basically a dead body, a hollow shell kept standing by billions in hidden debt. And here is the truly devastating twist. That massive debt belongs directly to the Moretti family, the worst enemies of the Rossi syndicate. It is a brilliant, silent execution. If Dominic signs his name on that contract, he accidentally swallows 2 billion poison, guaranteeing he goes to federal prison. The second that ink dries, his whole life goes up in flames. Penelope just sits there, completely frozen, watching the office printer spit out a literal death warrant. It is a chilling thing to realize. The most brutal revenge in life rarely comes from a weapon. Sometimes it is buried quietly in the fine print. Notice how Penelope trembles under the harsh office lights. She is clutching 30 pages of pure destruction against her chest, her heart beating so hard you can see her jacket moving. This quiet, gentle woman is suddenly standing on the edge of a mafia war. As the sun comes up, she walks straight into the glass office of Roland Sterling, an arrogant boss who sweats expensive liquor. She drops the red folder right on his desk, begging him to stop the acquisition, but Roland just gives her a cold, empty smile, entirely ignoring her visible panic. He refuses to even glance at the paperwork. We see this happen all the time, do we not? Blind pride will always stop a foolish person from seeing the fire that is already burning down their own house. Roland could not see the bloodbath coming, entirely distracted by a $50 million bonus. When pure greed takes over a mind, basic survival instincts fade away. Penelope is nearly crying, pointing at the bank numbers with a shaking finger, desperately trying to show him the trap. She tells him that if Dominic Rossi signs these papers, and kill everyone involved. But Roland just stands up, fixes his expensive tie, and talks down to her like she is a child. He calls her a nobody, claiming she has no idea how important men do business. It reveals a deeply painful truth about human nature. Trying to save someone who refuses to acknowledge the storm is the absolute fastest way to end up drowning right next to them. Most of us have dealt with bad bosses, but Roland's cruelty hits like a physical punch. He demands she destroy the documents and keep her mouth shut, or he will ruin her life. As he walks away, Penelope freezes in panic. The camera stays fixed on her wide, terrified eyes. She has a choice right now. She can run back to her safe little desk and wait for the violence to start, or she can break every rule she has ever followed. The exact second she grabs that red folder is pure tension. Her frantic run toward the private elevator is driven by the sheer terror of someone finally deciding to fight back. Here is the harsh lesson we all must accept. Doing the right thing is almost never safe, and it usually requires a terrifying moment of reckless defiance. High above the streets, the 50th floor feels like a dark temple built to make you feel small. Sitting at the head of the marble table is Dominic Rossi. He does not look like a street criminal. He carries a quieter, almost royal sadness, with dark, empty eyes, wearing a suit that quietly screams power. But the clothes are not what makes the room so hard to breathe in. It is his terrifying, heavy calmness. He knows he controls whether the men around him live or die today. He stays completely still, his breathing slow and steady, like a wolf, waiting for the exact right second to bite. It is a scene that forces us to face a very dark truth. The most dangerous threats you will ever encounter do not scream or wave their arms. They just sit there, watching you in absolute silence. Standing behind Dominic like a stone statue is Leo Cavallo, his most loyal soldier. If Dominic is the sharp scalpel, Leo is the heavy hammer, his face covered in scars from their bloody rise to the top. Across the massive table, the CEO of Meridian, Richard Croft, is completely drowning. Even surrounded by his expensive lawyers, Croft's attempt to look strong is failing miserably. You can literally see his hands shaking uncontrollably. His voice actually cracks under the terrible pressure as he swears the money is safe. The man is essentially begging for his life, just trying to make it out of the building alive. The lesson is written all over his sweating face. You can buy the most expensive clothes in the world, but your trembling hands will always give away your true fears. Let us look closely at this moment as you and I, because this is where Dominic's dangerous instincts take the wheel. He locks his cold, unblinking eyes right onto Croft. Growing up in a criminal family, Dominic learned to read the tiny invisible signs of human panic. He notices the weird way Croft shifts in his chair and the suspicious discounts being offered that make zero financial sense. Dominic lowers his voice to a rough whir, and the whole room freezes. Croft starts to fall apart, sweating and swearing that the audit is clean. Next to him, Leo leans in, whispering a dark warning in Italian. It is a masterclass in reading people, leaving us with a crucial rule for our own lives. No matter how much money is sitting on the table, never ignore the loud warnings of your own gut. Let's break down this opening shot. Dominic keeps his eyes locked, muttering in rough Sicilian to justify this dangerous bet. He is desperate for these shipping ports to wash his crime syndicate clean. Terrified the old Mafia bosses will pull his legacy back into the bloody gutter. Dominic actually sees himself as a tragic hero trying to break a family curse. As he unscrews his heavy gold pen, the director cuts sharply to the lobby below. Penelope is an absolute wreck, lungs burning as she sprints for the elevator. The contrast here is brilliant. Two completely different lives hurtling toward each other. It shows us something real about how life works. You can try to plan every detail of your future, but fate always has a way of introducing you to the exact person you never saw coming. Today, you and I are stepping into a masterclass on psychological pressure. The camera lingers on Penelope. She is an exhausted corporate auditor, trapped in an elevator climbing 50 floors up. She is practically gasping for air, hugging a red folder to her chest like it is a bulletproof vest. She is muttering about losing her health insurance, completely oblivious that she is walking straight into a cartel stronghold. It is almost funny, until the dark reality hits you. Corporate culture has so deeply warped her mind that she is more afraid of getting fired than getting killed. We have all been caught up in the stress of the daily grind at some point. It teaches a grounding lesson. No matter how much you worry about your career, a fancy job title will never protect you when real danger finally knocks on your door. Notice how the director lets the camera sit on the guards outside the boardroom. These guys are not just hired thugs. They are the physical extension of a mafia boss and his absolute control. Their hands rest near the jackets, making a quiet promise of violence. Then Penelope bursts out, shaking and trying to push right past them because of a coming emergency. Her voice breaks. She is completely drowning in panic. The guards just cross their arms, actually laughing at this fragile accountant trying to muscle into their dark world. They warn her to leave, but she honestly believes her financial spreadsheets matter to them. It is hard to watch, but it leaves us with something important to think about. Believing your own illusions might make you feel safe, but a comfortable lie will never shield you from the harsh realities of the world. The shot shifts to capture her hesitation. Penelope stands frozen, staring at those massive doors, running the math in her head. If Dominic Rossi signs that merger, he falls right into a federal trap. The guards give her one last warning before the bigger guy grabs her arm. He squeezes hard enough to leave bruises. But watch her reaction. The fear usually makes people freeze, but sometimes it pushes you past your breaking point. Penelope has spent years letting loud, angry bosses walk all over her. Not today. Riding a massive wave of adrenaline. She swings that red folder and smashes it directly into the guard's nose. You can actually hear the crack. It's an intense scene, but it holds a very raw truth that you cannot always politely ask for respect. Sometimes you just have to plant your feet and fight back to finally break the cycle. Before the other guard can even grab his weapon, Penelope throws her whole body against the wood. The heavy doors crash open, echoing through the room like a gunshot. Everyone freezes, and right there at the head of the table is Dominic Rossi. The framing makes him look like a king on a throne. His gold pen is hovering right over the signature line, but he does not even blink at the noise. His nerves are so completely deadened that it is actually scary to watch. He slowly raises his dark, hollow eyes. Penelope is now standing in the doorway, soaked from the rain, breathing hard, clutching that bent folder. The rival executives are panicking, but Dominic just sits in total silence. It shows us a great lesson about control. True power does not yell or panic when things go wrong. It stays quiet, observes the chaos, and decides what to do next. Let's pause right here, because the psychology of this next moment is incredible. Richard Croft, the rival executive, goes completely pale. Penelope yells across the room, begging Dominic not to sign the deal. In a split second, four security men pull silenced pistols and aim right at her heart. The bleeding guards grab her shoulders, waiting for the nod to end her life. And what does Penelope do? She just closes her eyes. She did her job, gave the warning, and is entirely ready to take a bullet for a company that does not care about her. It is tragic, but it shines a light on a very painful part of life. When you stop your own valuing you do fair woman, there will always be someone willing to take advantage of you. Letting go of your self-respect just gives the wrong people permission to step in and write your story for you. The camera pushes in close on her face. She is holding her breath, waiting for the gunshot, totally sure that she is about to die. Instead of a bullet, but a single voice cuts through the heavy air. It is not a shout. It is a soft, terrifying whisper from a man who lives and who dies. Dominic drops his pen onto the marble, and that little click echoes across the room's bringing down a gavel. He stands up, showing off his massive height, completely ignoring the guns pointed in his direction. He softly tells his men to back off. They instantly let go of her arms, like she is made of fire. It is a brilliant bit of character work that teaches us something very true. You can always figure out who really holds the power in any situation. They are the ones who never have to shout to make people listen. Notice how the shadows change as it tells Croft to shut his mouth without even bothering to look at him. It is pure intimidation. His dark eyes stay locked entirely on Penelope, taking in her ruined shoes and shaking fingers. He starts walking around that massive table with the slow grace of a tiger cornering its next meal. She can feel his physical presence crushing the air out of her lungs before he even reaches her. He stops inches away, smelling like cold rain and expensive cologne. When he asks for her name, his voice is a low, rumbling threat. Penelope forces her panic down and stammers out that she is a forensic auditor. It is a tense moment that leaves us with a difficult lesson. We are taught that honesty is the best policy, but sometimes, yes, telling the flat truth to the first person is the most dangerous thing you can do. Dominic leans in and softly mentions that her boss just guaranteed the books were clean. This is where Penelope makes a massive mistake. Still running on pure adrenaline, she snaps back, calling her boss a lazy fraud who never reads past the cover page. You can feel the oxygen vanish from the room. Insulting a kingpin's business partner right to his face is practically begging for a bullet. The guards grip their weapons, waiting for the kill order. But then Dominic does something terrifying. He smiles. It is a tiny, dark smirk that makes him look even more dangerous. He asks if she is totally sure about her math. Penelope, falling back into the safety of her numbers, nods yes. It is a wild piece of irony. Being incredibly at your job is usually a great thing, but if you show off those skills to the wrong people, it might just make you their prisoner. The camera drops to her shaking fingers as she presses that beat-up red folder right into his chest. Dominic calmly takes the papers. She tells him to check page 12 for the fake shipping schedules and page 14 for the massive hidden debt. For 30 agonizing seconds, nobody breathes. The only sound is the rain hitting the windows. We get to watch Penelope watching him. She notices the exact section his mind sharpened connects the dots. She sees the flash of betrayal in his eyes, followed immediately by the silent promise that someone will die tonight. It is a complex scene that leaves us with a heavy lesson. They say the truth will set you free, but handing a dark truth to a violent person means you are now a part of their world, tied to their actions, whether you like it or not. Stick with me, because this is the very second the power dynamic flips. A shadow so dark crosses Dominic's face that Penelope physically takes a step back. The crime boss just realized he got played, and you can practically feel the room freeze. He slowly closes the folder. Across the table, Croft is shaking, looking desperately at the exit. Dominic turns to his main enforcer. His voice is completely dead, stripped of all emotion, as he tells him to lock the doors. That board sliding into place sounds exactly like a coffin lid slamming shut. The rival lawyers try to run, but the guards throw them to the floor. It offers a harsh reality check. You can spend your whole life chasing money and status, but when the doors finally lock and the consequences arrive, all that cash cannot buy your way out. Dominic picks up the $4 billion contract and stares at Croft, who is struggling to breathe. In a quiet voice, Dominic brings up the hidden cartel debt buried in the paperwork, perfectly planted for the feds to find. Croft loses his mind. He starts crying and screaming, pointing at Penelope and saying she faked the numbers. But look at Dominic. No shouting, no wild movements. He just slowly rips that massive stack of paper in half, and then again. The piece lasers down onto the table like snow. He never blinks as he watches the sobbing executive, calmly telling his men to drag Croft down to the basement. It leaves us with a golden rule for life. The loudest person in the room is almost always covering up their own weakness, but that quiet person is the one who actually holds the power. Let us look at this scene together and figure out if she really won anything at all. Croft screams for his life as massive men drag him through the doorway, ignoring his frantic thrashing. In 5 seconds, the room empties, leaving only Dominic, his guards, and Penelope. Her adrenaline crashes hard. Her legs turn to water. The bitter irony. She just saved a criminal emperor and condemned men to a basement of horrors. Panicking, she points to the exit babbling about returning to her desk, but his low voice freezes her in place. You can't step into pitch blackness, rewrite the rules of survival, and expect to stroll casually back into the sunshine. The simple truth of life is that once you cross a moral line to save yourself, the life you knew is gone forever. She belongs to him now. Let's pause the frame right here. He closes the distance, his towering frame casting a shadow that swallows her whole. Penelope tilts her head back just to meet those dark, unreadable eyes. He reaches out and she flinches, yet his massive hand softly straightens her glasses, a rough thumb brushing the tear on her cheek. This is a highly calculated move. He's rewiring her nervous system, pouring the concrete for a trauma bond. He whispers how she preserved his empire, asking if she truly believes he would let her return to a spreadsheet. She stammers a weak excuse about needing to feed her cat. The lesson here is brutal. When a starving shark corners you in the freezing ocean, mentioning your pet goldfish will never save your life. We need to unpack this frame by frame. Watch the shadows shift as that terrifying, quiet smile returns to his face. Dominic speaks with the steady rhythm of a judge delivering a sentence. He notes that her boss was fully prepared to let him walk blindly into a federal trap, a mistake that always demands blood. But Penelope risked her own neck for a stranger. He leans closer, his breath warm against her ear, locking her in a paralyzing freeze. He whispers that she is his property now. Her logic completely shatters as she stares into his eyes, finding zero hesitation. Desperate, she babbles about her apartment lease, clinging to a reality that no longer exists. The lesson is haunting. The strongest cages aren't made of steel. They're built the exact second we surrender our free will.
Linger on the painful irony of this exact moment. Penelope, a regular accountant who works with desperately tries to set polite boundaries with an apex predator. She clings to reason,
her voice trembling as she insists she's an independent person. Dominic answers with quiet, suffocating dominance. He shifts his shoulders to block out the room's light, physically erasing her
illusion of safety. Then he drops the hammer. He calmly explains the $2 billion hole she just ripped into his syndicate. He turns the hard truth into a weapon,
sending her straight into clinical shock. All the blood leaves her face. The life lesson here is harsh but real. Logic is a completely useless shield when you're standing in front of a violent force of nature that only respects raw power. The camera captures a tragic shift in her body language the second the adrenaline leaves her veins. Penelope is no longer a quiet observer. She's bleeding bait in a shark tank. Before the panic fully descended, the heavy door swings open. Look at the empty void in his eyes as he slowly wipes fresh blood off his expensive gold watch. The man is a tailored nightmare. He flatly reports that their prisoner finally broke, confessing to a rat inside the firm. The truth hits like a physical blow. Her own manager, Roland, is the one who sold them all out. The invisible trap pulls tight around her neck. It teaches a heartbreaking lesson about blind trust. Sometimes the person smiling warmly at you is the exact snake who threw you to the lions. Watch the horror flood her face as the pieces click together. Roland set her up for the slaughter, using her quiet, obedient nature to hide his crimes. Right next to her, Dominic hums with a terrifying, cold rage. He starts firing off lethal commands to his men, but then, driven completely mad by the thought of her pet starving alone, Penelope does something insanely reckless. She reaches out and tightly grabs the arm of the Mafia boss. It's a desperate attempt to hold on to any shred of control. Normally, a man like him would snap her wrist without looking. Instead, Dominic freezes. The monster stops moving, anchored by her shaking fingers. The lesson here is fascinating. Exposing your raw vulnerability will often stop a seasoned predator far faster than a loaded weapon ever could. Focus closely on his eyes right here. As he looks down at her small fingers gripping his dark suit, you can actually see his mind shift. She's no longer an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. She is now his personal property. In a stroke of psychological brilliance, he commands his men to go retrieve her cat. He's forging invisible, heavy chains of dependency. When one of his killers questions why they're saving a pet during a gang war, Dominic just stares at him. The temperature in the room instantly drops 10 degrees. Questioning the boss is basically asking for a bullet. His silent, venomous glare radiates complete, suffocating control. The truth of this world is simple but profound. True power never actually has to yell to make an entire room hold its breath in terror. The criminal king has drawn a line in the sand. As his enforcer backs away, Dominic does something truly twisted. He slowly takes off his heavy wool coat and drops it over her shaking shoulders. To her panicked brain, it feels like a warm blanket of safety. They look at the frame physically. He's drowning her in his scent, cutting her off from the normal world she used to know. His hand locks onto her arm like an iron vice, steering her down toward the basement bunker. Out of the shadows, heavily armed mercenaries step into the harsh light. She has crossed the final threshold. The Mafia world has swallowed her whole. The lesson is chilling. Sometimes the very jacket keeping you warm is the exact net designed to trap you forever. The sound design alone tells the whole story. Her cheap office shoes squeak against the cold concrete, a tiny noise of civilian panic surrounded by silent, lethal killers. The camera follows them right to a row of black, armored SUVs. Dominic pushes her into the middle vehicle, sealing them inside. The heavy locks engage with a sickening click. Just like that, she's breathed alive inside a dark, leather-lined vault of bulletproof glass. A gorgeous, rolling prison. As the cars speed out into a violent city thunderstorm, Penelope just sits there, completely frozen by the sheer weight of her fear. The way she grips his oversized coat is like a drowning woman holding onto driftwood. The lesson of fate is incredibly dark. Survival often forces us to cling to the exact monster who threw us into the storm. Stick with me here, because the psychological whiplash is intense. Just a few hours ago, her biggest headache was a broken spreadsheet. Now, she's trapped in a moving tank with organized killers. Dominic quietly watches her brain start to shut down. He pours dark scotch and holds the heavy glass out to her. His voice sounds like a soft suggestion, but his eyes are giving an absolute command. She takes it. The burning liquor scorches her throat, physically forcing her racing heart to slow down. It's a masterclass in dark manipulation. When we're terrified, our bodies instinctively accept whatever comfort the person in charge decides to offer. The reality is grim. Trauma makes us terrifyingly easy to guide. When you're drowning, you will swallow anything just to catch your breath. The frame captures the pure agony of her trying to negotiate her way out. She's a small lamb trying to bargain with a wolf who owns the whole forest. She demands to know when she can leave, desperately clinging to the ghost of a normal life. Dominic just leans closer, Larsen's gravity invading a personal space with crushing gravity that only a real villain has. His large hand reaches up, slowly brushing a wet strand of hair away from her face. It's a deeply intimate, violating move. His voice drops into a low rumble as he performs verbal surgery on her mind, cutting away every single connection she has left to her old apartment. He shatters the hope that she is ever going back. The truth is, denial is a wonderful painkiller, but it always wears off the second the hook blade hit the bone. He looks directly into her eyes, legally reclassifying her as his personal property. He promises to keep her safe, but the invisible price tag is her total submission. You and I are watching the exact moment that the dark roots of a trauma bond finally break through the soil. The SUV pulls up to his penthouse, a floating glass fortress in the sky. He presses his hand to a scanner to unlock the heavy doors, a paranoid king locking away his stolen treasure. The very architecture is designed to make her feel small. It's a massive display of dirty money. Thick glass frames the violent lightning outside, while the expensive stone floors push artificial heat up into her cold feet. He is showing her that he controls the actual weather inside her life. The lesson is simple. A golden cage is always a prison. Let's look at this piece by piece, shall we? You and I are watching a woman whose mind is fracturing, blind to the staggering luxury around her. Penelope runs on raw survival instinct, while Dominic snaps out harsh orders, locking down every exit to prepare her gilded cage. He tells her to wash up and wait. He carries the terrifying, cold authority of a prison warden. Her spirit is simply too drained to fight back, so her body goes numb. The camera follows her trailing a heavily armed guard, drifting down a hallway of priceless paintings, like a ghost in a villain's museum. Here is a hard truth about human survival. Sometimes, shutting down completely and just following the rules is the only way to keep your heart beating until morning. The camera lingers on Penelope, standing under the boiling water of a marble shower. She scrubs her skin until it turns raw, a desperately human reaction to profound trauma. She is trying to wash away the invisible grime of the underworld, though the stain is already permanent. In that echoing quiet, her exhausted brain finally processes the reality. She is just a nameless accountant, yet she somehow broke a global crime syndicate. Stepping out of the steam, she spots navy blue silk pajamas resting on the vanity. Then comes the night's most terrifying twist. The garments are tailored to her exact measurements. The chilling lesson here hits hard. True vulnerability isn't standing naked in the dark. It is the horrifying realization that the monster was studying you long before you ever fell into his trap. Picture the framing of this shot. The living room lighting is brutally dim, casting jagged shadows. Having custom silk pajamas ready at 2 a.m. proves one terrifying fact. This man has been stalking Penelope for months. The second she puts them on injection, she subconsciously renders a piece of her autonomy. Yet, the fabric also strips away her dull office disguise, forcing her to stand tall. She steps out to find him pacing the floor. The polished suit is gone. He wears only a dark shirt, exposing the scarred muscle of a violent survivor. The corporate mask has been burned away, leaving only the monster breathing in the open. And I must remember a very simple, dangerous truth here. When the predator finally decides to drop his disguise, you better pray you aren't the only one locked in the room with him. The camera pushes in on his eyes the moment she steps into the light. He makes zero effort to hide the raw hunger radiating from his gaze. It is a dark obsession he kept buried, and the sheer physical weight of his stare shatters whatever sort of fragile courage Penelope had managed to scrape together she be. She desperately tries to play the tough negotiator, crossing her arms tight to demand a logical explanation. Dominic ignores her words. His heavy hand grips her shoulder, smoothly forcing her down into the cold precision of a police interrogator. He strips away the sugarcoating, telling her flat out that heavily armed hitmen you just kicked in the door to her apartment. The bitter lesson here is profound. Sometimes the hard answers we bravely demand turn out to be the exact nightmares we are trying to outrun. Let's freeze the frame right here, because this is the exact heartbeat where the steel trap snaps shut for good. He leans over her, delivering the chilling truth that assassins were waiting by her bed in the dark. Then, before the terror can even rip a scream from her throat, he softly promises that her cat is completely safe and currently terrorizing his security men. That violent, unexpected whiplash of pure relief shatters her very last emotional wall. Penelope finally breaks. She sobs helplessly as the suffocating reality of her near-death experience crashes down on her shoulders. And who is standing right there to catch her falling body? The syndicate boss himself. This reveals one of the darkest lessons of the human mind. When the absolute architect of your nightmare becomes your only safe place to cry, you are never truly going home again. Watch the physical blocking in this scene closely. What we are seeing is the raw definition of a trauma bond forming in real time. Dominic wraps his large hands around her fragile wrists. It paints a comforting illusion of safety, but is pressed down just hard enough to prove he still holds the leash. Forcing her chin up, he stares straight into her terrified eyes and promises to slaughter the entire Moretti family in 6 months. He is actively cementing his role as her violent savior. Broken by years of feeling completely invisible, Penelope weakly whispers that she is nothing but a simple accountant. But here is the tragic truth about human psychology. A dangerous man always needs a shiny mirror. He gently wipes a tear from her cheek and calls her extraordinary. He only builds her up so he can own her entirely. Stick with me, because this is where the dynamic gets truly fascinating. Notice the terrifying grace in his movements. This is the clinical stage where he inflates her self-worth, which is the quietest form of grooming. He praises her sharp mind, noting how she caught financial blind spots that elite lawyers completely missed. Penelope attempts to push back, using his first name to remind him she isn't a fragile doll. His dark eyes instantly lock onto hers, and he softly calls her an empire builder. It is a stunning piece of twisted manipulation. He drops a heavy platinum card onto the glass table, crowning her the chief financial officer of his shadow corporation. He promises her a massive staff and absolute freedom. Sometimes, the entire world is handed to you just to lock the door of a cage you will never want to leave. You and I really need to sit with the dangerous math happening behind Penelope's tear-stained eyes. She stares at that gleaming platinum card, silently weighing the years of crushing abuse from her old boss against this sudden, dizzying rush of authority. She is staring directly at a dark throne bought with blood money, and the absolute tragic beauty of it. She does not run. Her survival instinct flips a silent switch. She lifts her chin, her voice trembling just enough to show she is still terrified, and tells the monster that she has rules. Dominic flashes a devastating, ruined smile. He looks exactly like a starving wolf watching a rabbit stroll right into his teeth. Name them, he whispers into the quiet room. In life, we often find that the brightest fires burn right inside the cages we willingly choose for ourselves. The camera captures him staring with the heavy, unblinking intensity of a starving man discovering his final meal. He asks for her conditions, wrapping her in smooth Italian endearments that act like velvet ropes tying her down. The irony playing out in this room is brutally sharp. She sits there in silk pajamas, buried deep inside a reinforced criminal fortress, believing a tiny piece of platinum gives her the upper hand. Yet, for the very first time in her life, she refuses to shrink away. She forces air into her lungs and lays down her first absolute rule. She will not cook his books. If he wants to wash dirty money, he keeps it far away from her clean servers. A terrifying lesson unfolds, drawing a sharp line in the sand. Clan wangles with a monster only is exactly where he needs to stand. Her voice rings clear across the silent room. She completely refuses to take the fall on federal charges for a criminal syndicate. Dominic merely leans back into the leather sofa, crossing his massive arms. He looks relaxed, hiding a smirk because her fragile illusion of control is the most entertaining thing he has seen in years. He agrees instantly. She keeps the clean corporate empire while he manages the dirt. Then she drops her second demand, and you can see the intoxicating rush of power infecting her bloodstream. She demands the absolute right to fire the lazy kids in his finance department and build her own ruthless team. His dark eyes flash with dangerous amusement. If you give a quiet person just a little bit of power, they will always show you their face. She frames this massive power grab as a simple survival tactic. She looks straight into the cold eyes of a killer to say she needs total control just to keep him out of prison. The true tragedy here is that she is binding their fates together with her own hands. Dominic lowers his voice to a lethal whisper and steps deeply into her personal space. He drags his thumb slowly along her jawline, a calculated touch that sends a visible shiver down her spine. He is silently reminding her that her newfound power only exists because he allows it. Her breath hitches the exact moment his skin brushes hers. Then, completely shattering the heavy tension, she demands premium wet food for her cat. A genuine, deep laugh suddenly tears out of the untouchable crime boss. A moment of pure humanity can break through even the darkest shadows. You and I can feel the shock of that warm, human laughter echoing against the cold glass of his penthouse. But before the syndicate boss can process the strange emotion she pulled out of him, the heavy steel elevator doors slide open. His lethal enforcer, Leo, stalks into the room looking absolutely murderous. Cradled awkwardly in his massive arms is Penelope's 20-pound orange tabby cat. He glares at his boss, flatly announces the animal just bit an armed guard, and drops the cat onto the priceless rug. Penelope gasps, instantly crashing down to her knees. The cat runs straight to her, purring like a rusty engine against her trembling arm. We often cling desperately to tiny fragments of our ordinary past, hoping it will suppress the violent reality of the present threatens to swallow us whole. That sweet, fragile illusion of domestic peace shatters into dust almost instantly. Watch how Loz eyes with his boss. Every single trace of warmth drains from Dominic's face in real time. The charming man vanishes, replaced entirely by the dead, empty stare of a ruthless apex predator. Leo delivers the crushing blow. Roland Sterling managed to slip away before the strike team could break his door down. Worse, the Incepchat, Sterling downloaded the master blueprint of the entire legitimate empire. Every clean business and tax shelter Dominic built is on one drive, and Sterling is selling it to the Moretti crime syndicate. It brings us a bitter truth about life. The ghosts we fail to bury will always return to burn our houses to the ground. Let the camera linger on the absolute nightmare Penelope is processing right now. The silence stretching across the penthouse is thick enough to stop a heart. If the rival family buys those financial blueprints, they'll trigger federal audits, freeze all the clean money, and destroy the syndicate overnight. It would force Dominic straight back into the bloody life reefs wars he fought so hard to escape. Shpeege. He drops his voice to a terrifying whisper, demanding the location of the exchange. And Leo looks in admitting they are flying blind. Sterling is hiding his hibis in an encrypted Swiss server, waiting for $15 million to clear. We have to realize something profound here. True helplessness is a quiet room where all your worldly power means absolutely nothing. The second that cache clears the final location gets transmitted to the enemy. But watch carefully as the entire psychological dynamic of the room flips. Penelope stands up, wearing her silk pajamas like a forged suit of armor. All that brilliant corporate intellect her previous boss has tried to crush is suddenly drawn like a sword to protect her captor. She steps directly between these two violent men, demanding details about the Swiss routing. When Leo claims it is untraceable, she cuts him off cold. Her old boss is an arrogant creature of habit who never changes his security keys, she explains, demanding the fastest computer in the building. It proves a powerful point. Our greatest strength usually hides inside the Exaxi guilds the world told us were worthless. Dominic does not utter a single word, merely hinting toward the black computer on a frosted glass desk. Penelope bolts toward it, a massive orange cat trotting at her heels like a loyal bodyguard. She sinks into the leather chair, cracking her knuckles with the grim resolve of a soldier, and her hands blur across the keyboard. She rips straight into a root command terminal. Two dangerous men stand like statues behind her, their faces painted by the eerie green glow of reflecting code. She whispers that the firewall is a joke, and the terror finally vanishes from her eyes. We must remember this. True power is never handed to us by others. We discover at the exact moment we stop running and choose to wield the unique weapons we already possess.
The camera is capturing her quiet knowledge becomes she mutters that she built a secret backdoor into those servers years ago just to work from home.
In 3 minutes, her fingers fracture the global banking system. She locks on to the $15 million meant to destroy the syndicate. Dominic leans closer, asking if she can pull the plug. Penelope slowly turns her head with a wicked, triumphant smile on file. She is going to do something much worse, she whispers. She is rerouting all that cash into a flagged cartel account that Interpol watches day and night. It serves as a stark reminder for all of us. The quietest people often hold the sharpest knives, and sheer intellect will always outmaneuver brute force in the end. Today, you and I will unpack this scene together. Picture the frame freezing right here. Penelope just slammed the enter key, and the monitor flashes a massive compliance hold. With one trigger, she freezes $15 million of enemy cash without finishing a single drop of blood. Leo stands paralyzed, watching a quiet girl financially decimate their rivals. She swivels her chair, voice cold, announcing that Sterling is stranded. The camera shifts to Dominic. His eyes go dark with a twisted, obsessive awe. He leans over, trapping her against the desk, whispering that she is the deadliest weapon he owns. It is a chilling picture, and is the heavy truth we must face. Sometimes, the only people who finally recognize your true value are the exact monsters you should be running from. The scene cuts to the following morning. Golden sunlight fights through heavy storm clouds, spilling into her massive guest room. Inside, it is utterly dead silent. It is the kind of expensive isolation that slowly unravels a person. Penelope sits up, shoving tangled hair from her exhausted face as reality hits her. She just crossed a permanent line into the criminal underworld. The tragedy of her situation reveals a bitter irony we all face eventually. When you finally refuse to make yourself small for the people who ignore you, you risk selling your soul to the villains who actually respect you. A sharp knock suddenly shatters the quiet. She pulls the silk blanket up like a shield, but the door swings open. A sharp-eyed woman carrying armfuls of high-end fabrics, walks right in. The director guides us through a haunting transformation. Clara plainly states that she needs armor, not clothing. For 2 agonizing hours, she treats Penelope like a blank canvas, measuring every trembling inch. Penelope, a life in her life, hiding inside oversized sweaters, hoping to vanish. But when she stands before the mirror, she gasps. She is locked into a midnight blue power suit that fits with terrifying mathematical perfection. Her hair is now sleek and controlled. This is a complete psychological rewrite playing out in real time. The underlying lesson here is chilling, yet deeply human. If you wear a heavy mask of absolute power long enough to hide your inner terror, that mask will eventually become your real face, hence. There is no turning back. Let us look at this piece by piece together. She steps into black stilettos, shedding her nervous persona to become a weapon. Dominic waits by the elevator in a black suit and a blood-red tie. The man literally freezes. The camera captures him tracking every sharp line of her new silhouette in his eyes burning with the hunger of a narcissist, admiring his masterpiece. Penelope catches her breath, tragically mistaking her instinctive terror for romantic desire. He hears her murmurs that she's breathtaking, though it sounds far more like a warning than a compliment. He slowly offers his arm. She whispers that she is ready, slipping her trembling hand into his trap. The harsh truth of this moment is painful. Sometimes the cage is so beautifully decorated, we willingly lock the door ourselves. The camera cuts to the street, framing their arrival not as a meeting, but as a military strike. 3 armored trucks roll to a halt outside a massive glass skyscraper. Dominic steps onto the pavement, and the crowd practically parts like the sea. When Penelope emerges next, surrounded by men carrying actual rifles, the block breaks into nervous whispers. They ascend into Switzerland to the 60th floor. Without a single knock, Dominic kicks the heavy mahogany doors wide open. Inside sits a collection of the richest finance executives, with that snake Gregory Trent lounging at the head of the table. This reveals a very dark truth about human hierarchy. Worldly power is entirely fake. It only exists because we all agree to pretend it does, right up until a monster brings a bigger gun. You remember Trent, the smug executive who laughed at Penelope months ago. Now, the boardroom plunges into silence the second Dominic enters. His greeting is so cold it could crack ice, thus throwing a panicked Trent out of the main chair. Watch Dominic's body language closely. He does not sit. Instead, he pulls the leather chair back, offering it to Penelope. She takes a shaky breath, wearing her suit like armor, and sits at the head of the table. Dominic stands directly behind her, digging his hands deep into her shoulders. Do not be fooled. He is not acting as a supportive partner. He is branding his territory before the wolves. It is a harsh lesson in recognizing manipulation. Always watch the hands, because they will always reveal who truly owns the room. Let us look at this masterclass in psychological domination. Dominic stares down a row of tear-eyed corporate suits, formally crowning Penelope as chief financial officer. He softly declares that a single word from her lips is a direct order from him. Daring anyone to leave, the silence is deafening. Yet Trent cannot help himself. His bruised ego completely overrides his basic survival instincts as he sneers across the table, dismissing her as a useless junior auditor. It is truly painful to watch a desperate man dig his own shallow grave. We know that arrogance is usually just a cheap mask for deep insecurity, but letting wounded pride speak instead of your brain in a room full of crime bosses is a fatal mistake. The lesson here is simple sometimes. The absolute smartest thing you can do for your survival is to just keep your mouth shut. You can practically taste the heavy tension thickening the air in that boardroom. The Leo leans against the locked door, grinning like a shark, catching the scent of blood. Dominic grips Penelope so fiercely he resembles a loaded weapon. About pause the cinematic frame right here, and look at Penelope. She reaches up, gently touches his hand, and softly whispers for him to let her handle it. In a single heartbeat, the terrified hostage becomes the ruthless attack dog. She plugs her tablet into the projector and locks her cold eyes dead on Trent. With a terrifyingly calm voice, she suggests they review his real estate deals. A massive spreadsheet lights up the wall, melting Trent into sheer panic. The takeaway is clear. Pick a fight with someone who spent their life quietly memorizing the fine print while you were busy talking. You and I have probably both made the mistake of underestimating the quietest person in the room at some point. Trent certainly did. Penelope slowly swipes her screen, showing his $40 million purchase of 6 New Jersey warehouses. On paper, it looks perfectly standard, but then she systematically exposes the completely fabricated tax numbers, pointing out his use of a shady shell company for the appraisal. Trent begins to sweat, stammering that it is just normal business practice. Then she dropped the hammer. Her voice cracks through the room like a whip as she reveals the shell company belongs to his own brother-in-law. He stole $12 million. The boardroom gasps. The life lesson is glaring. If you plan to steal from a violent crime syndicate, never you'd use a trick an exhausted accountant can unravel before her morning coffee. Watched closely how the other executives practically throw their heavy chairs backward just to get away from Trent. He's a dead man walking, and nobody wants his blood ruining their expensive suits. Penelope slowly stands up, leaning over the polished mahogany table exactly like a predator cornering its next meal. She looks right through his soul, coldly explaining that he stole $12 million from the deadliest crime family in New York, or using a financial scam as a college freshman could beat. Trent is drenched in cold sweat, begging Dominic for his life, swearing the numbers are fake. Dominic does not even raise his voice his Mercedes. He simply spews the enforcer into the quiet room. Leo violently yanks Trent out of his chair. Life changes incredibly fast. 1 minute you rule the boardroom, and the next you are just garbage waiting for the disposal team. The camera intentionally lingers on Leo as a cruel laugh escapes his chest, telling the room they are about to see exactly what $12 million buys. Trent screams, his fingers leaving bloody trails on the heavy oak door frame until he is dragged into total, chilling silence. Amidst this absolute horror, Penelope simply sits back down. The remaining men stare at her like she is a literal god of ruin. She gracefully folds her hands, asking to review the new protocols with a terrifying calm. Dominic leans in, his lips gently pushing her to murmur a dark joke about his taxes. It is a cinematic masterpiece of psychological control unfolding right in front of us. Here is a quiet truth to remember when we build our emotional walls out of cruelty to stay safe. We inevitably fall deeply in love with the monsters guarding the front gates. Before Penelope can process the twisted intimacy of his soft words, Dominic feels his phone vibrate. The shift in his demeanor is violently sudden. That possessive warmth instantly drains from his face, leaving nothing behind but a mask of lethal ice. He dismisses the boardroom in a single breath, and the executives nearly crush each other, scrambling for the exit. In the heavy silence that follows, Dominic delivers the terrible news. The bank freeze allowed his team to track Sterling. When she whispers the question of where's, Dominic checks the heavy steel of his weapon, naming a private hangar at Teterboro. The polished corporate illusion completely shatters. It serves as a stark lesson for all of us. You can dredge your worst impulses in expensive suits, but the beast inside never truly sleeps. It only waits for the perfect moment to hunt. The cinematic lens tracks Dominic as he turns away from the table. He announces that Sterling is fleeing with the encrypted drive, firmly ordering Penelope to lock down the floor and stay behind. A corporate boardroom is one thing, but a tarmac gunfight is pure chaos. Yet Penelope does the absolute unthinkable. She steps away from safety, locking her cold eyes right onto his. Her voice never trembles as she reminds him that only she can wipe those financial codes. She demands to go wherever he goes. Dominic just stares at her, the tragic irony washing over the empty room. The devil did not force this woman to become a monster. He merely handed her the keys to the darkness she already held. We frequently blame the world for our shadows, completely ignoring how willingly we choose to step straight into the raging fire. The camera captures the exact moment he silently surrenders to her demand. He does not argue. He simply holds out his hand. Penelope takes it, stepping right off the edge into his violent underworld. Soon, they are tearing through the Lincoln Tunnel at 80 miles per hour, locked in a suffocating silence inside the armored convoy. Penelope balances her laptop in the back seat, her frantic fingers striking the keys like a desperate pianist. She knows Roland will avoid public networks to stay hidden. She just needs him to ping a local connection to trigger her digital kill switch. It is a psychological defense mechanism we know all too well. Sometimes, burying ourselves deeply in a complex task is the only way to survive the terror closing in around us. Intense, unwavering focus is very often just pure panic wearing an incredibly clever mask. The sharp, metallic click of a fresh magazine sliding into Dominic's pistols echoes against the heavy air of the car. His eyes are hollow and completely detached as he orders Penelope to stay perfectly still while he clears the hangar. She must wipe the drive, and the second her signal hits, the crushing gravity of the impending violence settles heavily on her chest. They arrive at Hangar 4B, where a sleek private jet screams loudly on the tarmac. But fate always scripts a remarkably bitter tragedy. Dominic is not the first person to arrive. Two black luxury cars sit abandoned by the main entrance, their heavy doors flung wide open like broken wings. We learn something deeply profound here, no matter how incredibly fast you try to run forward. The darkest parts of your past will always find a way to arrive exactly 5 minutes before you do. The cinematic lens violently snaps to Leo in the front seat. Spotting the abandoned vehicles, he draws his heavy weapon in an absolute blur. It is Moretti's rival syndicate. Lorenzo has clearly chosen the path of blood. Dominic does not even flinch at the sight, coldly ordering his driver to punch the gas. They do not bother to brake. Tons of armored steel tear straight through the chain link gate in a violent explosion of twisting metal. Before the dust can even settle, Dominic is moving, using the heavy car doors as shields while automatic gunfire shreds the quiet morning inside. Inside the vehicle, Penelope throws herself flat against the floorboards, her pulse hammering violently. We spend years making tiny, seemingly innocent compromises, only to wake up one day desperately dodging the very bullets we unknowingly loaded with our own hands. Let us step back and really examine Penelope in this terrifying moment. She is entirely consumed by the quiet poison of trauma bonding. She anchors her frantic eyes to the glowing laptop screen, desperate to trick her shattered nervous system by drowning in the cold logic of mathematics. Outside her fragile glass bubble, Dominic moves through the thick gun smoke like a vengeful spirit. He is no longer a polished corporate suit. He is a lethal apex predator placing 2 flawless rounds into a cartel enforcer without a single shift in his breathing. Through the cracked window, she glimpses Roland trembling helplessly against the fuel drums with the silver briefcase. It reveals a deeply uncomfortable truth. The terrifying monsters we lie awake fearing are often the exact same ones standing right between us and absolute, utter ruin. The camera sharply focuses on the shivering executive. Standing right over him is Vincent, the ruthless muscle of the Moretti crime family. He mercilessly grinds the hot barrel of his pistol AMIA directly into Roland's sweating, screaming demands over the deafening exchange of gunfire. Roland is completely broken, weeping uncontrollably about his vanished millions. This is exactly where the tragedy seals itself forever. Blinded by raw animal panic, Roland flips out his laptop to verify the stolen files, unknowingly pinging the Jet's local network. Inside the armored car, Penelope gasps as the connection hits. Her fingers strike the keyboard like lightning, entirely hijacked by basic survival instinct. It is a bitter lesson, but terror strips away all logic. When blind panic takes control of our minds, we inevitably hand the keys to our destruction straight to the enemy. The tension in this opening scene is masterfully built. Penelope slams the override command, desperate to prove her value to the man holding her captive. A glowing loading bar slowly eats away at the master directory. 34%. Outside, Vincent loses his temper. He brutally pistol whips Roland, sending the encrypted drive skittering across the wet tarmac. Vincent grabs it, screaming for his crew to fall back. 85%. Penelope whispers frantic prayers to the screen. Vincent runs, but freezes dead. Dominic is standing there like a statue, his weapon aimed right at Vincent. It shows us a brutal truth about life. You might be bold enough to steal the prize, but blinding arrogance always makes us forget the heavy price waiting at the door. Notice how the deafening gunfire suddenly fades into a terrifying silence. Dominic and his men step out of the smoke, boxing in the survivors. With a voice stripped of all emotion, Dominic tells Vincent to drop his weapon, but Vincent just smirks. He holds up that stolen drive like a holy relic, bragging that he holds the exact blueprint to tear down a criminal empire. Inside the instrument truck, Penelope watches her screen flash bright green. The wipe is flawless. The hardware is basically melted into slag. She taps on the thick glass, giving Leo a tiny thumbs up. There is a dark poetry to this defeat. Toxic pride makes us wave our winning cards in the air, entirely blind to the fact that someone hiding in the shadows just flipped the whole table. A slow, terrifying smile creeps across Dominic. His voice drops into a dark whisper as asks Vincent if he is really that confident. Vince looks down. The steady blue light on the drive flashes red, spits a single spark, and just dies, fried completely from the inside out. You can actually see the panic wash over Vincent as he realizes his ultimate bargaining chip is just a piece of useless plastic. Dominic stares right through him. He calmly tells Vincent to let Lorenzo know the audit failed and pulls the trigger. One shot rings out. Vincent hits the wet concrete and his surviving men instantly drop their guns. This moment teaches a harsh reality. The exact second you believe you have finally outsmarted fate is the very moment it rips the floorboards right out from under you. Roland holds his broken jaw on the bloody concrete. He stares up at the dead enforcer, watching Dominic slowly step out of the shadows, Scrambling back against the heavy fuel drums, Roland actually starts crying. He begs for his life, swearing absolute loyalty to the family. Dominic just looks down at him, totally detached, like a man staring at a dead bug. He quietly replies that Roland is neither loyal nor smart. He signals for Leo to toss the man into the soundproof trunk, where Roland will his last hours explaining every single stolen dollar. Dominic just walks away, feeling absolutely nothing. It is a deeply unsettling reality we face. Toxic people will push your boundaries to the breaking point, only to collapse and play the weeping victim the second you finally push back. Stick with me here because this next beat is crucial. Dominic pulls open the heavy steel door. Penelope is shaking so hard she is digging her fingernails into her palms just to keep from falling apart. He does not say a single word. He simply pulls her out of the seat and wraps her tightly in his arms, burying his face in her hair. He smells like cold rain and fresh gunpowder. And the real tragedy? Penelope holds on just as tight, pressing her face against the chest of a killer. There's a second the steel trap snaps shut on her heart. The storm fades to quiet as they drive back to the penthouse. It leaves us as with an agonizing lesson. When we are drowning in absolute chaos, we will desperately hold on to the very anchor that is pulling us down into the dark. Just look at the brilliant framing in this shot. City lights bleed through the tall glass windows, throwing cold shadows right across Penelope, and she is swallowed up in an oversized sweater, desperately looking for comfort after the sheer brutality of the mob war she just lived through. The heavy oak door swings open, and Dominic steps right into the frame. He is scrubbed clean of the violence, dressed in dark wool, projecting a terrifying control walls that breaks down her last emotional walls. He hands her a glass of 25-year-old scotch, his voice a low rumble as he confirms their enemies are gone. You and I can see the profound life lesson hidden here. No matter how much the world burns down around you, the relentless pulse of life simply demands you keep moving forward. The camera slowly lingers on Dominic, his composure like absolute ice. He casually mentions they just bled their rivals for $15 million. Penelope stares hard into her amber drink. Her knuckles are stark white. She is desperate to anchor her racing mind to normal corporate business. But Dominic shatters that safe illusion. The original deal is totally dead. His voice drops into a dark whisper, revealing they are going to buy 3 clean shipping companies, and she is the one who will draft the takeover. Penelope slowly turns. The dim lighting catches the raw, open vulnerability in her eyes. Why would a mob boss trust a total stranger to rebuild his empire? Because real trust is never simply handed over. It is fiercely forged in scorching fires of mutual destruction. Freeze the frame right here to truly appreciate the tragic beauty of this scene. Watch how Dominic slowly takes the glass out of Penelope's shaking fingers. He frames her face with his heavy hands, forcing a suffocating and inescapable intimacy. Dropping his cold mob mask, he whispers that his entire life people have only ever seen the monster. It is a masterful, heart-wrenching play for sympathy. She is the only person brave enough to stare down loaded guns just to save him. Her breath catches in the silence. She weakly protests that she was just doing her job, but he insists she was born for the shadows. The painful lesson here. Sometimes, the very people who finally recognize your hidden brilliance are the exact ones quietly planning to weaponize it against you. Notice the suffocating camera work as this psychological trap officially closes. Dominic leans in, completely eclipsing her vision and cutting off her connection to the normal world outside. He murmurs that she has spent her whole life shrinking herself just so mediocre men could feel powerful. He vows she will never be invisible again. The tragedy hits so hard here because Penelope actually starts crying, finally feeling seen after decades of hiding her true genius. Dominic takes her broken pieces and turns them into his own dark religion. When she breathlessly whispers her surrender, the steel jaws of the trap finally lock shut. His eyes flare with a raw, possessive fire. The crucial lesson we must carry with us: never let a desperate need for validation blind you to a beautiful cage. Dominic claims he belongs entirely to her, sealing their dark fate. He swears she will command his syndicate while he eliminates anyone who dares to block her path. Their physical collision is desperate, shot with chaotic and overwhelming energy. Penelope grabs him, unleashing a lifetime of repressed hunger for sheer dominance. He crushes her against the cold glass, his body totally blotting out the city lights. A brutal smash cut suddenly thrusts us 6 months into the future. We are in a freezing, sterile boardroom, surrounded by elite financial predators waiting for their orders. This stark cinematic shift delivers a brilliant point. Visible power can change hands in a fleeting instant, but unbreakable control is always quietly built in the shadows. The lighting here is clinically white, stripping away any trace of dark mob romance. There are no street thugs left. This boardroom is Penelope's modern army. She commands the space, looking like a lethal weapon in a custom emerald suit. The camera tracks her slow, deliberate pen taps against a thick dossier. Her voice is absolutely freezing as she confirms the ironclad tax shelters that make them a legitimate empire. The corporate predators erupt into applause. But I want you to look closely at her cold, hollow expression. That is the true cinematic tragedy of this story. Penelope believes she finally conquered the monster, but she has entirely mutated into him. It leaves us with a haunting truth. The most inescapable prisons are the invisible ones we happily build for ourselves. The camera pulls back for a breathtaking final frame. Dominic lounges in the shadows, indifferent to the clapping executives. His eyes remain violently fixated on Penelope. Beneath the marble table, his heavy hand closes around her thigh. It is a possessive strike, meant to remind her exactly who built the cage. But watch her reaction. Penelope does not tremble. A wicked, triumphant smirk touches her lips before she effortlessly goes back to commanding their empire. That terrified accountant from the first act is dead and buried. In her place sits a ruthless apex predator. The lesson from this ending is grim. Sometimes the exact toxic environment designed to break your spirit becomes the very forge that teaches you how to conquer the entire game. Before the screen goes black, you and I need to unpack what Pack just witnessed. If this dive into a beautifully toxic mind resonated with you, leave a like. I want to read your thoughts in the comments. What exact moment sank its hooks in? Was it the visceral crack of Penelope shattering that guard's nose, or the cold grace of Dominic dismantling his rival without blinking? Share this with someone who loves peeling back the tragic layers of human nature, and hit subscribe so we can keep exploring the shadows of cinema together. As the credits roll, take this lesson with you. When your own life starts spinning into absolute chaos, remember that blind reaction is a trap. Keeping a quiet, observant mind and simply reading the room isn't just a defense mechanism. It is your sharpest weapon. Penelope's transformation is also an inspiring lesson about self-worth. At the beginning, she has accepted a smaller version of herself because the world around her says that she does not belong in powerful spaces. She hides behind ordinary clothes, works late in a cubicle, and expects to be ignored. However, the story shows that her invisibility is not her true identity. It is the result of a workplace culture that fails to value her. When she finally acts boldly, she begins to see herself differently. Dominic's recognition of her brilliance is important, but the deeper lesson is that Penelope already had power before anyone praised her. Her confidence grows when she chooses to use her abilities without apology. This is a valuable educational message, especially for people who struggle with insecurity, body image, social rejection, or workplace discrimination. The story teaches that self-worth should not depend on fitting society's narrow standards of beauty, status, or personality. Penelope is not valuable because she becomes connected to a powerful man. She is valuable because she is intelligent, brave, ethical, and capable. The people who underestimated her were wrong from the beginning. Her rise to CFO symbolizes what can happen when a person stops shrinking themselves to make others comfortable. In schools and workplaces, people need encouragement to recognize their own strengths. Many talented individuals remain quiet because they fear judgment. Penelope's journey reminds viewers that confidence is not arrogance. Confidence is the decision to stop apologizing for your existence. The educational lesson is that every person should learn to identify their skill, detect their dignity, and refuse to let unfair treatment define their future.